Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors, and leave us not in temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever. Amen. Our thoughts are prayers, and we are always praying. Our thoughts are prayers. Listen to what you're saying. Seek a higher consciousness, a state of peacefulness, and know that God is always there. And every thought becomes a prayer.
One of the benefits of prayerful meditation is that in that state we can receive the guidance we are seeking, the answer to some of our prayers. So I'd like to invite you now to prepare yourself to go into the silence. Allow yourself to be supported comfortably by your chair. Take in deep, slow, cleansing breaths. Inhaling peace and releasing all tension and busyness with your exhale. Close your eyes if you like. Begin to focus your attention towards your center, to that place at your very core where your Christ light burns. Where that bit of the divine resides within you. Gently move your attention closer to this light. Experience the peace and the safety that reside there. It is here that the still small voice speaks to you, speaks the truth to you about who you are. A child of the divine. Rest now for a time in this presence and hear that still small voice in the silence. In the silence. Healing is yours. Inspiration is yours here. We are grateful for our connection to all that is. It connects each of us to one another and to the world. We can live from this knowledge. And now, gently begin to return your attention to the here, this sanctuary. Take a few deep cleansing breaths in gratitude. And when you are ready, open your eyes. Today's talk is from Emily Cady's book, Lessons in Truth, Chapter 7. And in that chapter, she talks about things such as how we learn and how we absorb what we learn and how we implement it. She calls this process chemicalization. And she also speaks about the various aspects of our nature, the personality and the individuality. Before I begin on her book, I'd like to read a short excerpt from this book, The Biology of Belief. I don't know if anyone here is familiar with it. It was written by a professor who taught here in Wisconsin at UWM. He taught in their School of Medicine. And what he had to do with was how modern medicine and science is discovering that indeed there is a connection between healing and spirituality. He said that in his lectures, I provide two sets of plastic filters, one red and one green. I have the audience pick one color and then look at a blank screen. Then I tell them to yell out whether the image I project next is one that generates love or generates fear. Those in the audience that don the red belief filters see an inviting picture of a cottage labeled House of Love, flowers, a sunny sky, and the message, I live in love. Those wearing the green filters see a threatening dark sky, bats, snakes, a ghost hovering outside a dark, gloomy house, and the words, I live in fear. I always get enjoyment out of seeing how the audience responds to the confusion when half yell out, I live in love, and the other half, in equal certainty, yell out, I live in fear, in response to the same image. Then I ask the audience to change to the opposite colored filters. My point is that you can choose what you see. Now, since this talk is about learning, I have a little joke here. It says that they say one should learn something new every day. Manure. In the 16th and 17th century, everything had to be transported by ship. And it was also before commercial fertilizer's invention, so large shipments of manure were common. It was shipped dry because in dry form it weighed a lot less than when wet. But once water, at sea for instance, hit it, it not only became heavier, but the process of fermentation began, of which one of the byproducts is methane gas. As the stuff was stored below decks in bundles, you can see what could and did happen. Methane began to build up below decks, and when the first time someone came below at night with a lantern, boom! Several ships were destroyed in this manner before it was determined just what was happening. After that, the bundles of manure were always stamped with the term "ship high in transit" on them, which meant for the sailors to stow it high enough off the lower decks so that any water that came into the hold would not touch the volatile cargo and start the production of methane. Thus evolved the term SHIT, ship high in transit, which has come down through the centuries and is in use to this very day. You probably did not know how the history of this word or how it began, and neither did I. I always thought it was a golf term. In her book, Emily Cady describes the chemicalization process. This is the way we react to new knowledge and learning. She gave the example of adding vinegar to soda, which results in turmoil until the process is complete. The final product is an improvement to the separate parts. The greater the change, the greater the process. Spiritual growth involves this chemicalization. As we learn truth, our old beliefs can cause turmoil. Sometimes we don't understand this truth at first. Katie says this process is harder for those of us who have deeply ingrained, but possibly false learning, than for those who have little or none. She also likes to talk about personality versus individuality. Personality in her book is our earthly human state. It is egocentric, driven by physical needs and desires. The need to win, be right, validated, safe. It's human to have these drives. Individuality is the manifestation of the divine within us. As a unique example of God, individually blessed with unlimited possibilities. Our ego is not the enemy. The ego is what drives us to seek the things which we need to survive in the physical world. Food, water, shelter, safety, belonging. At its best, ego serves our higher nature, individuality. Many people live their entire lives within their egos. They are blind to the higher potential we all have within us. We can see this every day in those who are driven to win, dominate, be right, be validated. These things always leave something missing in their lives. And that something, I believe, is the higher spiritual nature in us all. Our connection to the divine, which we call God. To travel this path is scary at first. It means we have to choose to look at things through the eyes of God within each one of us. This is also what some of us call co-creation in unity. Consciously seeking the higher viewpoint in all our experiences. To choose to believe all is well and the universe is on our side. I'll share one of my own experiences with chemicalization. I was raised Roman Catholic, and in parochial school, I learned about God up in the heavens, looking down on me. This God was male, bearded, white-robed, all-powerful. He gave me a free will in order to test my obedience to his will. He would judge me and reward or punish me according to how I acted while I'm here on earth. I began to question some of the church's teachings at a fairly young age, and as I grew up, I fell away from religion. I saw too much of what I perceived as hypocrisy, bureaucracy, in traditional churches, as well as intolerance and prejudice and suspicion. Why would an all-powerful, all-knowing, all-loving God create us in his own image with the curse of original sin? Why did many of us deserve eternal punishment? What did we do to inherit original sin? Wasn't God all-forgiving, all-loving? Am I unworthy? What about the description, God is love? Now, I don't condemn traditional religions. There are many paths to God, and there is some good in all of them. I discovered unity years later. I was attracted to its teachings. They seemed to make sense to me. The positive, forgiving, loving, and accepting philosophy felt more real than what I had learned as a child. Unity taught me that God was not a man or a woman. God is more than either. God is not an individual person. God is more than all persons. Even though I had dismissed my childhood learning about God, this was quite a challenge for me. It took some time and a great deal of chemicalization for me to begin to understand that God is everywhere present within each of us. God is not just all-powerful. God is all of the power in the universe. God is everywhere. Everything exists in God's mind. Nothing is unknown to God. God is all the knowledge in existence. One of the more challenging concepts is the idea that God is great enough to love and cherish each one of us on a personal level. Another big challenge for me was Jesus' teaching that the kingdom of heaven is within each of us. That means we can experience heaven right here, right now. We don't need to wait until we pass into the spiritual realm. Unity teaches us that the divine spark within is a part of the whole of God. We are eternal individuals, and that on that level we have existed since before time began and will continue to exist after time ends. In order for me to begin to understand these things, I had to undergo this process I described earlier. And in my case, at first, I was bewildered. These things were so foreign to my childhood experience in the traditional church. I remember attending a class at Unity Village, and after a deep meditation by the instructor, who was a master in it, by the way, she asked us to go out and walk around the grounds of Unity Village and continue to meditate all day, and then report back on what our experience was like. And it's amazing. Everyone in the class said that they had aha moments at the very least. And it was a different way of looking at things. Now, I can't say a thunderbolt struck me, but by the next day I was beginning to glimpse the truth. This learning process is lifelong for us here and for each of us. Some rare individuals understand right away, but for most of us it goes more slowly. We think we must struggle with our egos. We forget the truth that our egos are subservient to our divine nature. We look at things through earthly eyes instead of through the divine, through God's eyes. When the chemicalization process is over, we begin to see the good in everything. We can experience the peace that goes beyond all understanding. I still have aha moments where someone or something I heard years later finally makes sense. It's like, golly, I heard that already, but didn't really understand it. We've heard that God's intention for us is to become more godlike. We can choose to do this in painless ways, or we can resist and invite pain as a teacher. I'd like to say I follow the painless method all the time, but that would not be truthful. One thing I have learned is that if I go against truth, I already know the old cosmic 2x4 is there to remind me. But how would it be if everyone learned the truth and grew spiritually more towards perfection? What would our world look like, Glenn? How would our lives be? There have been ascended people who show us how to live. Jesus is a perfect example. And Jesus taught at a level that is easy to understand, even when translated through all the different languages. He taught at a level that a completely uneducated person could get it. The Sermon on the Mount is a classic example of that. Jesus also taught through parable, which is storytelling to stress a point or to make a point. Jesus said, "Do you not know the kingdom of heaven is within you?" Think about that. I mean, he was part of a traditional belief system in Judaism, and he came upon this truth on his own, like many ascended people who've come before and since him. He went off, into the desert and meditated and prayed and allowed this still small voice to become louder and more powerful and more easily understood. For many of us, spiritual progress seems to go more slowly than that. Many enlightened spiritual teachers believe that we are on the cusp of great change, even now. And it's often that when we are on the cusp of great change that there is the greatest divergence. We hear the word polarization in our society a lot today. That's a good example of that. However, most all of us have seen what's been occurring in Houston and in Texas as a result of the terrible damage from the hurricane. And the best in people comes out somehow. They forget whether they're conservatives or liberals or this or that or the other, and they react to one another out of the innate good which is within all of us. Many of us can conceal it and hide it, but it's there, and it's a hopeful sign to see, especially in this, as I said, in this day and age. Change towards these advanced spiritual thinkers are thinking we are on the cusp of. It is towards bringing heaven closer to here on earth. I choose to hope they are right, that the human race will evolve to a higher level and mature towards our birthright, individual examples of the divine. We can then say in truth, "Thy kingdom come." Now, before I close, I'd like to read another quotation from this book. It's actually his quotation of a Gandhi prayer, Mahatma Gandhi. Everyone knows who he was. It's short and simple. Your beliefs become your thoughts. Your thoughts become your words. Your words become your actions. Your actions become your habits. Your habits become your values. Your values become your destiny. Thank you. Bless you.